So we finally have the Netflix live adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and overall, I think it's fine. And when I say that I think it's fine, it's more the fact that I didn't hate it. Like, there are plenty of things in the show that I can take issue with, and believe me, we'll get into it. But at the end of the day, I didn't hate it. I don't want this show to be cancelled. I think overall it's fine. And although I didn't hate it, one of the biggest and glaring issues I had with the show from the premise was the fact that why do we need a live action Avatar? It doesn't make any sense. And having seen the final product, you don't really need to. The whole time I was watching the show, I just kept thinking to myself, I might as well just be watching the cartoon right now. But that being said, one of the things that the show didn't do was it didn't quell that thought I had going into the show, which was, do we even need a live action version of Avatar: The Last Airbender? Because the whole time I was watching the show, I couldn't help but think to myself, why am I watching this? I could just be watching the cartoon right now. It does it way better. Like, don't get me wrong, the Netflix show is way better than the M. Night Shyamalan film. Though, to be fair, with the M. Night film, I don't think that film is nearly as bad as people say it is. Like, it's bad, but it's not that bad. Insulting to an Avatar fan, sure, yeah, I'll agree with that. But in terms of it being like a god-awful film that is like on the level of like Birdemic in The Room, no. Though it is funny though, the Netflix show at times does feel kind of Shyamalan-ish, but that's due to the direction, because some of the direction in the show is just, it's so bizarre. Some of the acting in the show is so wooden, but then also at times it's really good. Like, I don't want this show to be cancelled. I'm happy for them to adapt all 3 seasons of Avatar. But also, this show needs to improve a lot if they're going to do that. But that's not to say that there isn't any good in the show. For the most part, there is a bunch of good things in the show that I really do like, and in fact even love. Similar to the animated series, Prince Zuko and Uncle Iroh are the best parts of the show. It's funny, because when I look at my spectrum of the Avatar fandom, as a kid, Aang was my favourite character. Aang still is one of my favourite characters. And then a couple of years later, as I grew up, Sokka was my favourite, because hey, he's the funny one. But then as I got into my teen years, I was like, wait, no, Zuko is the best character. But no, real maturation is when you hit your 20s and you realize that Uncle Iroh is the best character of the entire show, because Uncle Iroh is such an amazing character, and I think Paul Sun-Hyung Lee absolutely killed it as Uncle Iroh. He's easily the best part of the show. And the thing is, going in, I knew he was like the perfect fit because I'd seen him in Kim's Convenience and his upper was similar to Uncle Iroh. I mean, they're different, but like you could see the potential for him to play Uncle Iroh. And obviously he's in like The Mandalorian stuff. Like, I was familiar with this actor, and so when he was cast as Iroh, I was like, that's perfect casting. And you watch the show and he's perfect casting. He's also not doing a Mako impression. He's just the character. I look at the guy and I'm like, that's Uncle Iroh. Like, honestly, if the show gets greenlit for a season 2, I'm very much excited for them to adapt the Tales of Ba Sing Se, because oh my god, that episode, like, again, as a kid, you don't really like understand the importance and the beauty of that episode until you get older. Oh my god, it's so gut-wrenching. You know, the scene where he sings Leaves from the Vine when he's like at his son's like resting place? Oh my god. Avatar is so special, man. Leaves from the vine, come marching home, little soldier boy. And the thing is that I will say about the Netflix show is that it too understands the dynamic of Zuko and Iroh, and I think for the most part that's what the writers are most interested in, because there are many scenes that just expand upon Zuko and Iroh's relationship. Like the scene where Zuko consoles Uncle Iroh after his son's death was fantastic. The scene where Iroh joins Zuko on his mission to find the Avatar, and he's just like, I have everything I need on the ship. Mwah! Fantastic scene. And going into Zuko, I think Zuko is also really well done in the show. That being said, he can be a bit too whiny at times, because for the most part, Zuko in the animated show was more hot-headed than he was whiny. Like, I remember in episode 2, it starts, Aang's just escaped the ship, and Zuko's kind of like throwing a temper tantrum, which I buy, but I also don't buy, because it just feels a bit too erratic and a bit too emotional. Like, it's not coming from a place of anger, it's coming more from a place of, like, vulnerability. And Zuko is both, but Zuko is more anger than he is vulnerability. That being said, though, I love the episode that showcased the Agni Kai between Fire Lord Ozai and Zuko. Granted, they changed it, because from what I remember in the animated show, Zuko didn't fight Fire Lord Ozai. Ozai just punished him. But I did like the fact that in the show, they changed it to where Ozai was trying to force Zuko to fight him. In many ways, trying to teach him a terrible lesson. And one of the changes behind Agni Kai that I liked was Zuko's intentions of calling out the War Council, because although he does that in the animated series, I think one of the best parts of the Netflix show was the fact that they strengthened the reason as to why Zuko was so loyal to those members. And I think a strong adaptation change that the show made was having the squadron that Zuko defended be the squadron that comes with him when he's searching for the Avatar. I love the moment where Iroh tells them about Zuko's Agni Kai, and they all understand the sacrifice he made for them, and then Zuko steps onto the ship, and all of a sudden the squadron are just like really responsive, and they're really like obedient because they understand the sacrifice Zuko made for them. And although I'm just gushing about Zuko and Iroh, I think overall the cast is good. I've seen people say that the cast can't act. I don't think so. I think a lot of their bad acting comes down to the writing and also to poor direction. I'm not saying their line deliveries can't be hit or miss at times, but for the most part, I don't think they're bad actors. And for the most part, most of the cast members match their characters. I see them on screen and I'm like, yep, that's Aang, yep, that's Katara, yep, that's Sokka, yep, that's Zuko. A lot of the action for the most part is also well done. I think the realization of the bending looks really cool in live action. Granted, some of the visual effects kind of wonky, but for the most part they brought the bending to life in a really cool and interesting way. It's inconsistent, but for the most part it looks good, and the overall look and aesthetic of the show feels like Avatar. Everything looks like how it should. I look at the costumes, although granted they're a bit too clean, I look at them and I go, yep, that's the Water Tribe, that's the Air Nomads, that's the Fire Nation. It looks like Avatar. Now let's get on to the bad. Easily the worst part of the show is the writing. More specifically, the show's over-reliance of exposition. Characters don't show how they feel a lot of the time. They just say how they feel in really clunky expositional dialogue. They literally just spell it out for the audience. For example, there's a scene between Aang and Katara where they're talking about Sokka, and she's like, oh, Sokka had to grow up very quickly because dad left. And Aang was like, oh, he did, didn't he? He has to grow up so quickly. And it's like, yeah, I get it. You don't have to spell it out. We understand that the dad leaving meant that he had to grow up quicker. He had to take control and become a leader. Like, yeah, we get that. You don't have to spell it out. Or there's the scene where Aang finds that he's the Avatar, and then he just has this conversation with Appa where he's just talking to him, and he's just like, oh, I'm scared of power. I don't want to be the Avatar. I'm scared that I will lose control and become all too powerful and be corrupted. And it's like, yeah, we don't need to know that, we can tell. There's a reason why Aang ran away in the show. And speaking of the Air Nomad flashback, I take issue with that being the first thing we see in the show, purely for the fact that there's a reason why in the cartoon that was told in flashback. In the episode in the animated series where we find out that Aang discovered he was the Avatar and ran away because he knew he was going to be separated from Monk Gyatso, he literally runs away, is very cowardly, and he ends up falling into the storm and going into the iceberg. That was Aang's dark secret. There's a reason why it was so impactful, why Katara and Sokka were kind of shocked when they discovered that Aang ran away. Because for the most part, that stage in the show, we didn't know Aang could be that selfish, that dark. Aang, for the most part, was the optimistic, bubbly, light, fluffy ball of energy. He was brave, he was courageous. You wouldn't expect him to do something as cowardly as that. But then also, you, as the audience, and Katara and Sokka realize that Aang is still a kid at the end. There's a reason why he ran away, because he wasn't old enough to understand it yet. But in the live action show, it just plays out in a chronological order, and it doesn't have as much of an impact. And it also negates the impact of Aang realizing that he's the last airbender and that the Air Nomads have been massacred, because we literally just saw them all die on screen. Also, I've seen people take issue with Aang flying. He wasn't flying. You could very clearly tell that he was using the air current. Granted, the CGI is very wonky, so it may have looked like he was flying, but he wasn't flying. I also didn't like how the show handled Bumi, because Bumi hating Aang and resenting Aang for disappearing for 100 years, that's not Bumi's character. Granted, the idea presented was interesting, but then also it kind of falls flat. The whole episode, Bumi's like, you don't need friends, you have to be alone, like how I was alone, you have to deal with all this, you have to deal with the Fire Nation the way I dealt with them, you have to be alone. But then by the end, Aang is like saved by his friends and he's like, no, I don't have to, I'm not gonna learn anything from you, Bumi. The idea presented is okay, but also it just goes against Bumi's character. I feel like when you're adapting something, one of the main elements that you as a storyteller needs to do is stay true to the core of the character. Bumi being resentful over Aang, no, that's not Bumi. I feel like this would have worked much better if Bumi was like really hard and really aggressive throughout most of the episode, and Aang didn't know it was Bumi until the very end, you know, like in the animated series. I also didn't like how the show handled Suki. The Kyoshi Warriors are fine, but Suki was just a bit... she wasn't playful, she wasn't fun. And because of that, her and Sokka's chemistry, relationship thing, it lacked playful energy. It just felt awkward and stilted and really weird. Their romance scenes were so awkward because there was no teasing. She was just awkwardly staring at him and it was like, what is going on? Like, there was a reason as to why Sokka was so overtly sexist in the beginning of the show. It was him being the tough masculine man, overcompensating, and then when he met the Kyoshi warriors and was humbled by them, it added a playful dynamic to him and Suki. Not to mention the fact that his interaction with the Kyoshi warriors and Suki humbled him, and he became a better person because of it. He grew past his sexist tendencies, but because it's not present in the Netflix show, it just feels really awkward and weird. Also, Kyoshi physically taking over Aang was just way too much. Now, in the animated show, there is a moment where Avatar Roku takes over Aang, but it's for a very quick moment, and it's more to be like an illusion than, say, like actually going into action and full-on possessing Aang. I remember when Kyoshi took over Aang in the Netflix show, I was like, what the hell? When did he have this power? It's so weird, because if Aang could call upon the past avatars to take over, then why didn't he do that before? Especially considering the fact that Aang right now is a kid and isn't as strong as the previous avatars, why doesn't he use and abuse that power? Also, speaking of romance, I also didn't really care for Sokka and Yue's romance either. Like, it just felt a bit flat. Like, I remember the animated show, it was really sweet and kind of tragic because Sokka was like head over heels over Yue, and Yue also liked him, but she was also betrothed to another. It was sweet. It was really nice. In the show, it's like, okay, they're talking. They like each other, I guess. Oh no, she's dead. Wow. I don't really feel it. I didn't care. Also, one of the dumbest things I will say about season 1 is the fact that Aang is like, oh, I need to learn waterbending, I guess. Katara is literally training to do waterbending. She finds the scroll. Gran gives her a scroll or something here, but in the show they steal it from the pirates and such. But when Katara is training, Aang doesn't bother to train with her. But even still, they go to the Northern Water Tribe, and Aang still doesn't learn waterbending. What was the point? They didn't go there so Katara could train. It was the fact that Aang could go there to train. What were they doing? What? Another thing I'll say too about the show overall is the fact that it's not very funny. Like, yes, the show pays homage to certain funny aspects of the show. Like, we get Secret Tunnel, which I love. They do the thing where Aang's riding the air ball and then smashes it into the rock and stuff. Like, yeah, it pays homage in ways to the humor of Avatar. But the show itself isn't funny. Sokka isn't funny. He's just sarcastic and witty, but his wit isn't funny. And I think inherently the reason why the show isn't as funny as it should be is the fact that it's live action. The comedy has to transform to fit a live action medium, but at the same time, the beauty and the magic of Avatar was the fact that it was animated. A lot of the creativity and energy and humor of the original Avatar animated series was because it was animation. Aang could be big and expressive. The action could be big and expressive. They could do the anime-esque like, it worked in that medium because it was animated. Like, at its core, Avatar The Last Airbender is intrinsically an animated series and should remain as such. That's the beauty and charm of Avatar. Trying to realize that in real life is just a bit counterintuitive. You know, it's almost kind of like if you wanted to turn the Lego movie into live action. Why would you do that? The whole point of the Lego movie is the fact that it's Lego. Like, at its core, Avatar The Last Airbender was designed to be an animated series. You know, I think that's probably one of the main reasons as to why the original creators left this show, purely for the fact that they probably realized, what's the point? We're telling the same story, we've already told this story, but also, it doesn't fit the live action medium. Like, there's a reason why they've gone off now to Nickelodeon to create Avatar Studios and create more animated Avatar films, because at the end of the day, Avatar needs to be an animation. And I just don't like this principle and philosophy that in order for a piece of art to be legitimized, it has to be in live action. You know, that was something growing up in my teenage years. I would have loved a live action Avatar. I'd have been like, yes, this is what we need. This would be perfect. But having seen it, I've realized you don't really need it. The animated show works perfectly as is, so you don't need to change it. But to wrap things up, overall, Avatar The Last Airbender, the live action version, is fine. I didn't hate it, I don't despise it, I don't want the show to be cancelled, but it's also not great either. There are a lot of things in it that I do like, specifically Zuko and Iroh are easily the best parts of the show, and for the most part, the cast feels like their characters, and the show itself feels like Avatar, but it's also missing the magic, the spark that makes Avatar Avatar. But that being said, I am interested in a season 2 of this show, and I would keep watching it because I love the Avatar story, but also I don't feel like there was anything terrible in the show where I was just like, I hate this, this is awful, this is just this. No, it was fine. I do feel like a lot of the negative attitude towards the show is being blown out of proportion, but also I don't think the show is amazing either. You know, unlike a certain show on Amazon that's based on a beloved fantasy franchise that's, you know, well beloved and well written and such, the creators of the show, I feel, are actually trying. They do care about Avatar, they want to do the story justice. Like, I was watching the Sword and the Pen's Reflections videos on Avatar, and how she went to the premiere and met the creators, and how they wanted to make the best possible product. She met them and was just like, yeah, they genuinely wanted to create a great show. I believe her, and I also believe the fact that the creators wanted to put in the effort. You can tell that they're trying, and I feel like with the possibility of a season 2 and a stronger writing team, they can achieve it. You can tell that they love Avatar, you can tell that they love the story. Unlike certain things where, you know, they purposefully get writers who have never read the material and, you know, hate the material and just, like, want to do it for a quick buck. But those are my thoughts on Netflix's live-action Avatar: The Last Airbender. God, that's a mouthful. What did you guys think of the show? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, subscribe on social media, all the good stuff. Until we meet again, see you guys next time.